record. Yeah. And yeah, like we will be, how the Q&A is going to go today is we're going to first ask like a series of questions just around their background and like how they got to their role, what are some challenges, and then we're going to be opening up the floor to the rest of the audience to ask their questions. But yeah, I'm super excited to get to know the alumni. I'm going to be moderating it, so if you have any questions that you want to ask the alumni, feel free to message me on the Zoom, and then we can ask that later on. But yeah, before like, we get into questions, I would love to do a round of intros. So let's start with Oscar.
Hey everyone, I'm Oscar. I graduated in 2020. I studied data science and economics, and I was part of SAAS. So I did it for 4 years. During that time, I served as external vice president, the financial vice president. I ran the research and publications committee, which was a committee at the time. I don't think it exists anymore. But yeah, SAAS was a huge part of my time there. Really helped. I give it a lot of credit for where I am today. And today I'm working as a data scientist at a company called Niche. So they do college and K-12 rankings. So think of it as kind of like a competitor to US News and all that. But I work on their personalization efforts. So really answering the question around like, what is a good college or what's the best college for a student who's using our platform? So really interesting questions I get to answer at work. Happy to dive more into that too. And just happy to be here to share my experience and also hear what the club and everybody else is into and what interested in these days.
Yeah, let's go on to Brian.
Hi everyone, I'm Brian. I graduated from Berkeley in 2020. I did my undergrad there in CS, applied math and stats. I also did like my fifth year MS there, so I mostly studied like machine learning and things when I was at Berkeley. I also spent 4.5 years of my time in Berkeley in SAAS. It was called many different names during that time, but SAAS is what we'll call it now. And now I currently work as an algorithm developer at Hudson River Trading, doing quantitative research. It's a proprietary trading firm, so I primarily work on like developing predictive signals and models for like automated / like systematic trading strategies.
Awesome. Yeah, let's go on to, is it Jorge? Am I saying your name right?
Yeah, Jorge, you said it right.
Awesome.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Jorge. I was in Codebase for 2 years, from sophomore year till I graduated. But yeah, I graduated actually just last May, so I'm still a new grad, still a baby. But yeah, I'm currently a software engineer at Google, and I'm working from the New York office. And yeah.
Let's go on to Isabelle.
Hello, I'm Isabelle. I graduated in class of 2022, so it's only been a year since I graduated. I was in Codebase for 4 years, so definitely was very formative in my college experience. And I'm glad to be back and talking to other like Codebase and other Berkeley students, I believe. I don't exactly know who's in the audience right now. But I am a software engineer at a company called Vanta. We do compliance and security software. So our goal is to secure the internet by creating automated tests and controls that help customers, which are like other tech companies for the most part, demonstrate their security compliance to their customers. So yeah, that's what I do.
Cool. Let's do Shashank next.
Hi everybody, I'm Shashank. I graduated Berkeley May 2021. I studied statistics, economics, and data science, and I was part of SAAS my junior and senior year. Currently, I'm a data scientist at TikTok, but between the time of graduating and joining TikTok, I was also working in EY again as a data scientist in consulting.
Cool. And then lastly, Jing, yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Jiying. Berkeley class of 2019, although I graduated a little bit earlier, was in SAAS in my junior and part of my senior years. And currently I work as a data scientist in biopharma. I'm at Genentech, but I've also had previous experience at Mehta.
Okay, amazing. There's just like so many variety of experiences that like I'm just excited to hear you guys like talk and tell us more. But yeah, let's jump like straight into questions. So my first question for everyone is, can you tell us a little bit about like how did you kind of get into your role? Like what kind of reeled you in? And like also why do you think your role is super important? Because like today's a career fair with like tech roles all everywhere. So for instance, we have people interested in product, interested in data science and suite, but all those roles can be very different and they have different values. So I'd love to hear what got you into it and like why is it super important? And let's do like reverse order. Let's go Jiying first and then we'll go from her and then everyone else.
Okay, perfect. I was literally just gonna write down the question because I was afraid I'll forget if it gets to me. Okay, so how did I get into data science? In terms of how I got into statistics in the field in general, it was a really straightforward answer in high school. I just felt like I was better at it, and it just came to me more naturally. And so I decided to pursue statistics as an undergrad degree at Berkeley. And so far, it's all worked out for me. So that's basically how I got into it. I've always been interested and passionate in health. And so at Berkeley, I found the biostats department. I did research in the computational science biology department and all really enjoyed that. Decided to learn a little bit more and got into my master's at Stanford, also doing a lot of work in the Stanford Med School. So my journey has always been tied to health. And so it's been a natural progression for me to come here to biopharma. And what I love about my job is that I think that here we can make a level of impact that is really exciting. It's very motivating. It's very like rare to have. For instance, I'm working on a drug that literally helps older people regain their vision once they lose it. And so I feel like it's really hard to give a value pitch that's that doesn't like touch your heart. And so that's what gets me out of bed every day, and that's what keeps me going.
That sounds super cool. Yeah. Let's go Shashank.
So I kind of found data science relatively organically once I came to Berkeley, 2017. Data science wasn't a major at that time or something, but I kind of just knew what subjects I was interested in, found Data 8 as a class, really enjoyed it. And then just one thing led to another, started studying stats and data science. In terms of sort of like picking data science as a SWE, personally for me, it was more about like an interest in stats more than just an interest in coding. That was kind of like my decision point. I'm guessing some of you might be kind of considering between SWE and DS. So you need to think about like how much you love coding versus the math portion of it, because domain knowledge is kind of involved in both. In terms of my specific role, I'm quite happy in terms of like how data science applied. At TikTok, I work in the anti-automation team. What that really means is like we're trying to fight bots and web scrapers and data crawlers and so on, and try to ban them. So like what just excites me is just like kind of like the insane amount of data and activity that you'd see. And then the other interesting kind of part is kind of like data science is sort of in part an extension, has game theory aspects in it as well. So what kind of I do is like the opponent I'm facing are like real life people and attackers who, write bot scripts. So kind of like they, evolve, and then we have to evolve and they have to evolve. So it's kind of like a very survival kind of atmosphere or something.
That sounds really cool. Yeah. Let's do Isabelle.
Yeah, so I decided on software engineering based off of, I was also CS when I was in school, and I think Codebase really opened up the opportunity to try different software projects. And I liked how we were able to build things like from scratch, which is part of the reason why I joined a startup. And also you could see your impact real time. So you could directly see the results of whatever you were building. And I think software engineering applies to a lot of different fields. I've worked in a lot of different quote unquote smaller parts of industry from different internships. So I've worked with like legal teams. Now I'm in more so security. So that's like way more tech focused. But I think it's interesting being able to apply software to a lot of different industries that need it, because eventually I feel like we're going to move towards using software for most things. And in terms of my company, so Vanta works on security and compliance specifically. So this isn't like pen testing and like it's not much like Shashank's job where like I'm defending against attackers. I'm mostly working on security in terms of like day-to-day security. So making sure companies have employees and companies use two-factor authentication, making sure S3 buckets are encrypted, things like that. And the goal of our company is to keep other companies accountable. So basically compliance is the way the government keeps companies accountable right now. They have like very old and archaic forms of like, oh, the company is generally trustworthy, and you have an auditor that goes in and looks at all the information, and it's also very wishy-washy. It's very like subjective based off of who the auditor is, and it's not really clear how privacy is maintained for their customers. So our company automates that process, make sure we create a stricter standard and a more broad and encompassing standard for all industries. And we're hoping to like expand into different types of industries and making sure that everybody is doing what's right for their customers. So I think there is a lot of impact in terms of, I know I've been in my information has been in data breaches before. Having your social security number leaked is like not a fun thing. And so I feel like I can definitely see the impact of what I'm doing and what in work every day. So yeah, I really like my work at Vanta. And I think there's like a lot of other industries in SWE that you can be just as impactful in. So
Awesome. Let's go to the other SWE, Jorge.
Yeah, I guess for like my background, I applied to Berkeley as CS, but people often like ask me like, oh, why did you apply? And I just like, I don't really know because I didn't have CS experience in high school. I didn't do like robotics or like other like CS clubs in high school. I didn't even take APCS. So I kind of had like an idea that I wanted to go into CS, but since I didn't have experience before, I took CS10 my first semester, and I actually really liked it. And then after that, I like took the whole 61A series. And then yeah, luckily I declared as LNS. And then I also joined Codebase my sophomore year. So I think that also gave me a lot of exposure to like different projects and kind of helped me decide what parts of like tech I like working in. But yeah, and now with my role, I think I also really enjoy it. I currently work in Google Search, so I think for me, it's like pretty fulfilling to be able to work on tools that like my friends and family are using. So things like Google Search or like searching for different things, all that I find really interesting. And yeah, I guess like Isabelle said, we are moving towards like having software in a lot of different industries, and it just seems like it's going to be like a big part of the future, obviously like automating things and like different tasks. So I think that's why software engineering is so important and why obviously there's like so much demand for hiring. But yeah, I think I would say software engineering has definitely been like fulfilling for me. Yeah.
Cool. Let's do Brian now.
Yeah, so I took like kind of a meandering path towards my current role. So I came into school as like a math major without much reasoning outside of just like liking math. But then as I stayed for longer, I kind of learned like how much value I could get out of like studying something like a little bit more applied by way of like studying like computer science and statistics. So then career-wise, like I think my path is like somewhat more like well elucidated by like the sorts of internship roles and like things I tried during college and what I learned, what I wanted and like what I learned from them with regards to my career based on like what I like felt was missing from each like role. Or first I tried some like sort of like more data analytics / like sciencey kind of role, which was like really fun. I really enjoyed like running experiments and like doing that sort of data analysis. But I also felt like it was missing this sort of like system building or like architecting that you kind of get to do in a more like kind of engineering role. So I tried that too. I like worked in like software engineering at like a big tech company. And that was like also really fun. I really enjoyed like building things and like writing like lots of code to go into these like large like pre-existing systems. But then I felt like I wasn't really getting this sort of like data science / like stats like experience that I was also looking for in terms of like using the math and like stats that I'd studied. So then I spent like a lot of time in school, like doing like research. I did like machine learning research and like computational biology. I thought that was like very interesting, where like then I started getting like both like the system building by way of like building this like large like research project, while also kind of doing like the more like statsy, like mathy kind of things I was also like curious about. But then I felt like research in school just moves like really slowly. So I didn't really want to do like my PhD, for example, because like I find that the review cycle, for example, for like writing papers is like very long, and the feedback cycle tends to be like pretty slow. So then that was kind of like the main thing I wanted in addition there. So to kind of come around to like why I find like my job at HRT like pretty fulfilling is that I think it kind of captures like the best of all those worlds while filling like all those like other holes that I had in like my previous roles, where I get to do like a lot of like system building, like programming things when I'm like developing these strategies. But I also get to do a lot of like very interesting like stats, like research when I'm like building like predictive models for like trading stocks or whatever other like securities we do. And moreover, in contrast to the research that I was doing in school, I find that like the work I do now tends to be like much faster feedback, whereas like review cycles in academia can take like months and months and months. The research here can like move within like days or weeks or whatever like shorter time frame. So overall, I find like the problems that I'm working on are like very interesting, and they kind of like let me use all the different skills that I learned in college and like wanted to use in like a good like fast-paced environment where I feel like I can like really contribute a lot like very quickly to the sorts of things we work on here.
That sounds super interesting. I admire you to being able to like work in a fast-paced environment, because I'm very slow. I gotta work in a takes me a while to understand things, but that sounds really cool. But yeah, let's go to Oscar.
Yeah, I think for me it's an interesting path because I don't think I really actually chose to be here almost. I went to Cal. I wanted to be a business major. I applied to Haas. I did all that. One thing that kind of bugged me in the back of the head was like, how are people like making these decisions? Like, what are they making the basis off of? And like data science is kind of one way of answering that question almost. So I didn't get into Haas. So if anybody else didn't get in, welcome to the club. You're gonna do fine. But I mean, I enjoyed SAAS because like I had a friend in there, and she just kind of pulled me into there, and then I was able to meet Shashank and Brian and all that, and just learn like what data science and statistics are. So and I was really interested by that. It's kind of like, how do we use math in a way that is really applicable to the real world. So I mean, I graduated in COVID. I took the first job I could find pretty much because that was not a great time for recruiting. And luckily enough, I'm at the company where I am. So one piece of advice I would give is like, well, I started off as a data analyst, and then I made it very clear that my path was wanting to be in data science. And one piece of advice I would say is like, make that clear, like where you want to go, so that your manager can advocate for you. So down the road, when that need started opening up, I got put in that role because I was, I kind of made that clear in the beginning. And what I really like about that role today is that it's kind of a blend of a lot of like different interests I have. So on one side, we get to like solve really high impact questions of like what kind of college do people want, but also that kind of blends in a little bit of domain knowledge, a little bit of business side kind of thinking as well too. So it's a little blend of that technical skill set, the soft skill set that I think I've always been interested in as well, and just help kind of like bring that all together. And I also think just like from an impact standpoint, yes, I'm also like, it's been a pretty like positive. I think I'm doing a positive thing for the world. So hopefully that's the case. But also like, because I'm at a startup, like, and I think a few folks have said as well too, your impact is immediate. Like there's not really that much of a layer between you and like the production site that like gets put to users, which is a little bit scary, but also very, very like really cool as well too.
Yeah, thanks, Oscar, for that definition of data science. Seems really, now I want to do it. Yeah, so but last but not least, we have a representative from my club, Product Space. Do you want to introduce yourself a little, Sahil, and then you can answer the question. The question that I asked was like, what kind of reeled you in your role, and like why is it important to like the company or just in general?
Awesome. I'm sorry, what was it? What in my role?
Like why is your role important?
Okay, cool. So just a little bit about me. Graduated from Berkeley last spring, studying Economics and Business. Did a lot of stuff with entrepreneurship while I was here, worked on a couple AI startups, and it kind of fed into my interest in product management, where I realized that a lot of the work, the toughest work that entrepreneurs have to do is need finding. identifying customer problems that are actual customer problems and not stuff in your head. And that's one of the core things that PMs have to do, more so than many other roles. So I joined product space about 3 years ago, my sophomore year, just because I wanted to find a community of people who were also interested in that, excited about customer problems, excited about pursuing that kind of field. And largely with the help of product space, was able to land my role now, which is a rotational product manager at Palo Alto Networks. For context, Palo Alto Networks is a cybersecurity firm. A lot of cybersecurity people on this panel. That's cool. My focus in particular is on quantum computing cybersecurity. So just as a brief overview, what that means is that quantum computers will cause a lot of security risks with what they can do to how cryptography and encryption works in the internet now. So my role is basically building solutions to save the internet from being completely broken by quantum computers. So that kind of leads into why I'm excited about my role, which is that it's something that's very impactful, something that very cutting edge, a lot of people care about. And also with the program that I'm a part of, I get to learn from a lot of people who are extremely talented. This morning, actually, I was able to ask direct questions directly from the chief product officer to get mentorship from him. So it's been really fun so far.
Amazing. Yeah, it's great to see you again, Sahil.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have my second question for you guys. So I feel like at school, I always wonder about like what are some skills or what are some resources that I should like need to get the role that I want. So I was wondering if you guys could talk about that. Like, what are some classes maybe that you took, or what are some skills that you developed at Berkeley that really helped you kind of like helped you land that role and help you be more successful in your job? So yeah, let's actually start this time with Sahil, and then we'll go around the ladder again.
Yeah, with classes, with PM, it's a bit tough because most of them, frankly, are not that applicable. So I'll say this in the context of PM, just because I think it'll be different from, say, more technical roles like CS. And the value of the class depends on what product area you focus on. Where a lot of the role of the PM, they have to know their stuff in their domain extremely well, like even better than engineering, where engineering knows the minute details much better than the PM, but the PM understands the market and the product area a lot better. So in my case, for example, would be cybersecurity and specifically cryptography. That's why it's a bit hard to plan for. You kind of just have to, if you're interested in PM, I would actually just suggest taking a broad set of classes across a lot of different domains. That's what I did. I think it worked decently well. So probably doesn't apply to other kinds of roles, but that's my suggestion for PM.
Okay, awesome. Do you have like any resources or you think like necessary skills? It doesn't have to necessarily, to clarify the question, like it could just be any resources like skills, classes like that people should like look into.
Yeah. With skills, I'll talk about things you could do to build the skills, because the skills themselves are things like need finding and being able to identify customer problems, which hard to like learn that in a book. I would work on side projects. If like maybe the startup classes here might be a good fit. They're a bit hit or miss in some cases, but basically work on something where you're working to solve someone's problem. And maybe that's a side project, maybe that's some startup class, or maybe you're starting a new company. That looks very nice on your resume for PM, but it also just builds the actual skills you'll need.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, let's go to Oscar.
Yeah, I think I think there's two ways to answer this question. One, it's like to get the job versus like succeed at the job. I think it's two questions. To get the job, I would say a lot of the times companies aren't really testing you on, at least my experience, it depends on your role, obviously, doesn't always test you on like the hardest thing, like most theoretical thing, but they want you to get the basics right. So, and they want you to be able to explain those basics really well. So good resource for that, just like look up YouTube interviews, look up like practice leak code, obviously, just kind of familiarize yourself with that interview process. But what I would say, like in terms of on the job, on the role, I think classes wise, 102, Data 102 was one of my favorites, really helpful, I think, on a daily basis, just so that it really taught like, it was kind of like the first time where like a lot of the concepts and I've been learning through a lot of classes like all came together in a really interesting way. So I really enjoyed that. 135 is also, stat 135 that is, really helps like put down good basics just around statistical testing, all that kind of stuff. But I'll say the number one thing for me, and is the 61 series for CS. I think on my job today, if you're a data analyst, if you're a data scientist, you don't have to be a good coder. Like for the most part, there are some who are really good at math, some are really good at coding. But for me, it's been a really good differentiator of just like, it prepares you so well that like you are able to like help, like be able to write code fast. You're able to get things done quickly. You're able to, like, for example, I've helped out on backend code sometimes, and I don't think that would be possible if I didn't take 61 series. So I'll say that's definitely one side as well. And also, last thing I'll say is that if you're thinking about data analysts or data scientists, I was shocked by how much SQL there is in the Berkeley program. I don't feel like there was that much SQL that was being used, but it's pretty much like every single day and probably like 60% of my time.
Cool. Yeah, let's go to Brian.
Yeah, I think like there's basically three pillars / like categories of classes that are useful for both like the job and like interviewing for like my kind of role. First, as I alluded to before, like there's still a good amount of like kind of engineering / like programming skills that are necessary for the job. To that end, I echo like Oscar's point that like the entire 61 series is like very useful. Out of the upper divs, I also found like CS 162 and CS 170 like very good to take. And then second pillar like / group would be like the more like statsy classes, so like data science / machine learning / stats. So to that end, yeah, I thought Stat 135 was very useful. Stat 151A, which is like linear models, is like very useful for finance. Because it just turns out that like much of the world is like very linear, and like linear models are often like the best thing to use in like many settings, especially in like the financial context. And then also like CS 199 is extremely good. I thought that was actually my favorite class at Berkeley. Even if you don't necessarily do a lot of like machine learning, I think it's like useful for being able to think about things in that kind of like framework, where I think it teaches you how to think about like, I don't know, overfitting or like sorts of like trade-offs between like certain parameters like very easily. And even if you're not directly using like the models, which you also might be, like taking that class, I think lets you understand like lots of different models and lots of different ways of thinking about data, that I thought were pretty useful. And also there's just like the sort of math classes. I think for like finance, the most useful ones tend to be in like the fields of like probability and linear algebra. So like the likes of like Stat 150 / or 140 or EE 126 for like probability classes. And then like for linear algebra, like Math 110, like EE 127 tend to be very useful. So those are kind of like the main like kind of purely academic things that come to mind. The last thing I would say is like in addition to like coursework, I think for like my job specifically, I found like the most useful experience I had at Berkeley was doing like research for a couple of years. I think like especially if you end up doing something where your work is a little bit more independent and like kind of self-driven as far as like doing like research, it's very important to have like that kind of experience where like even if the research you do is like not like directly relevant, like I did like biology research, for example, which is not like exactly directly applicable to finance. It teaches you a lot of like very useful kind of like softer skills in terms of like being able to persevere through like very open-ended and like not necessarily solvable problems, which is like something that is like pretty non-trivial and gave me like quite easy to like give up on problems when there's like not an obvious problem in sight, obvious solution in sight rather. And like kind of working through like independent research, I think like kind of builds up your calluses for being able to work through this like kind of roadblocks better.
Yeah, thank you for all those classes. I definitely won't take them, but someone might. Yeah, let's go to Jorge.
Yeah, I guess for me, I think most of my experience actually came from Codebase and just like outside of coursework. I think like regarding classes, I would say like also the 61 series. I think like once you take 61B, you're like a pretty decent developer and like you could probably like do really good at coding. And then beyond that, it's probably just like you want to like specialize and do like some of the ML classes or like AI, or different things like security. But I think aside from like little like things that I picked up in classes, like I've had to use like C++ recently in my job. So like taking 61C and 162 have been like helpful, just like learn the language. But I think, yeah, like Codebase is what really like prepared me the most for what software development would look like as like a full-time employee besides like internships. So I think that was one of the most valuable experiences that I had in Berkeley. Just because the variety of projects that I got to work on. I worked on 3 different projects, and some of them were like front end, some of them were back end, some of them were like full stack. And every semester, I feel like I was getting exposure to different technologies. And sometimes even now as a full time, people will ask me like, "Oh, have you worked with this technology or this tool?" And like, luckily, I encountered it in one of my Codebase projects or just in like other experiences. So yeah, I would say I think joining a club if you're interested in software development, or just finding like a group of people that you can kind of simulate the software development experience outside of just like classes would be like really helpful if you're trying to go into SWE.
Cool. Yeah, let's go to Isabelle.
Yeah, building off of what Jorge said, I read the question as like 1, getting the job, and then 2, like working at the job. I think SWE is actually one of those fields that getting a job doesn't necessarily have to go directly hand in hand with classes. If you've done the 61 series and you like generally know all the different data types and data structures, and you know like Java or Python, I think that's like a good start from classes. And the rest you can probably get from LeetCode and other experiences like that. So a lot of the like SWE interview process is very formulaic, and you start with a coding challenge, then you do like coding interviews in which you're talking to like one of the employees there and walking through a problem. And a lot of those problems aren't like super like gotcha problems, like 170 type, like you have to do this really specific, really cool looking algorithm. A lot of the times they actually look for, you get a really simple problem, but you have a lot of complicated features or complicated steps in it, and you try to explain yourself well, so be able to like work well with the person who's interviewing you. And also you can break down the problem into smaller solutions. So there's like a lot of problems online already that are good examples for that. And personally, when I was doing interviewing, I would just go through a ton of those problems, practice with somebody else, like practice communicating as I'm coding, being able to stop and explain myself. And I think that's like more important for interviews, like that's what they're really looking for. Plus, additional step is find someone who kind of intimidates you and ask them to interview you, because odds are you'll like trip up a little bit more as you're talking. So that's in terms of interviewing, but in terms of my actual job, I do think a lot of software engineering, the languages, the different like tech stacks you'll use, they'll always be changing throughout your life. And so more so than just learning a language, I think it's important to learn how to get comfortable with that uncertainty, like being able to Google things on your own, being able to try to work things out and like create a debugging process in your head. And so to that end, I think being able to just do whatever project, like do any type of small project on your own, like try to learn things on your own, get stuck, get frustrated about being stuck, realize you can get through it even though you got stuck. Like that type of confidence is very helpful. And in terms of classes, very much agree with Brian. I think 162 is a great class to take if you want to get into back end related things in software engineering. For front end things, I think you could probably learn through online resources. But you might not necessarily work directly on operating systems, but a lot of the concepts that make operating systems work are used in like complicated systems as well. So I think caching, threading, like why am I forgetting the word? Doing things at the same time, parallelism. I'm thinking of a word, but that starts with a C, but I'm forgetting it. Those are all like useful in general. Like they'll be applied even if you're not working directly on operating systems. So yeah. I don't know. The summary of that is, I guess, LeetCode, trying and failing at things, and 162.
Awesome. Yeah. I guess I gotta look for someone that's intimidating to interview with me. I never thought about that. That's cool. Yeah, let's go to Shashank.
So I'm personally definitely more on the math stats side of data science than sort of like part of like the computing or engineering side of it. In terms of one thing Oscar really said well was kind of like differentiating between the skills required for interviewing versus skills on the job. I would say, at least sort of like from my role and my experience, the way the interview skills are required and the knowledge required, they kind of test enough that if you can pass that, you can learn the skills required on the job pretty much on the job. For example, like as I said, right, like I'm in security. While interviewing over here, I had no idea how to ban attackers or how to identify a bot versus not a bot or so on. So that domain knowledge and so on kind of comes on the job, wherein in data science they're kind of checking in terms of how do you approach modeling problems, how do you kind of like approach different situations, and what do you think about data. The classes, I think, like kind of like are fuzzied up because honestly there was so much interaction between like data science stats and econ classes, but broad based like CS 189, data 100, data 102, econ 101A, all of them more or less kind of teach you some combination of like machine learning, game theory, loss, and so on and so forth. So I would say one thing in terms of kind of like data science that I found pretty interesting is knowing the most advanced models and kind of like trying to show that wasn't really like, nobody ever like asked me about like XGBoost or complicated neural network architecture during my interviews or something. What they did ask more about was like, okay, can I actually like show that I understand the math behind regression, right? Like, can I actually like, do those matrix multiplications or something? In a couple of times for game theory questions, like, did I know how to actually use a Lagrangian really well or something or whatever? If anything, like I've not taken a Lagrangian in terms of work, but them ask me the question, by that they kind of knew that, okay, if I can understand the basic concepts behind like how you get to those like sort of like loss functions and so on, I can learn the other parts of the thing on the job. So I think more about is like kind of like the basic understanding of different concepts or something and understanding the math behind it. From the coding side or something, at least for data science, I didn't take anything higher than 61B in terms of CS classes or something. However, what Oscar said, like there's a lot more SQL than you'd probably like realize in Berkeley classes or something. And for that, lead code was probably my best tool. Like I barely learned any SQL required for my job during the classes. It was all lead code.
Cool. Yeah, let's go to Jiying.
All right. A couple points on this one. First of all, agree with everybody here in that from first principles, secure your fundamentals. Know your linear regressions, know your models, know your math, know your programming. That lays the foundation for everything, and that's where the talking points start. But honestly, beyond that, just be really open to exploring things. And I think that what college really was for me is that the biggest, most valuable experience I got out of it was when I tried something that scared me. And this is different for each person. It could be totally not even relevant to CS or stats or anything. Like the best class I have ever taken is the baking decal. And I'm saying that because I started off in that class. I went in, I couldn't even make a cookie. I was scared to make a cookie. By the end of that class, never have to buy a macaron ever again in my life. And honestly, I learned so much more about debugging through that class than through any of my CS or stats work. Because when I'm faced with code, and this is not to like put down anyone, but like when I'm faced with code, sometimes like I get a bug, I delete stuff until it works. Sometimes I don't understand how it works. But if your cake collapses, you gotta go and you gotta know how's the sugar acting, how's the baking soda acting, why is it that this error appeared and how can I fix it from the very, very root of the problem? I think that problem solving approach and that mindset and learning how to learn, how to have that resiliency, how to persevere and find, debug the root of the problem, that was a really, really important skill set that has carried through all the way until this day. So while you're in college, while you have all of these opportunities to explore, like do one thing that scares you. You don't have to minor in it, you don't have to major in it, just do one thing that scares you because you'll get so much out of it. And then third point I want to make is that I think it's really important. I know it's hard to maybe at your age, but I wasn't sure at my age, but you have to know what you want to know. And that's how people can start helping you. Like if I'd say, I just want to get a job in the future, like there's many ways that can go. It's really hard to know how to help you, but if you say like, I want to, for instance, for me, it was like, I want to work in health. I want to find ways to connect technology to health and improve people's health. Then you can start talking. Then people will tell you, hey, have you heard of this company? Have you heard of this club? I'm on this project. How do you get involved? And then you start knowing what you need to know. Like, I need to know R, I need to know SQL, I need to know Python for this. Then you go and find the resources for it, which could be things like 61A, or I think they teach Python that, or like the biostats course that you need. So everything's really tailored down to where you want to go, what you want to get out of it, but you have to know where you want to go first. And that's how people can start helping you. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I completely agree with Oscar. Like, we need to learn how you got into that decal because it's insanely competitive. But that's one of my bucket list things is I want to get into that decal. But yeah, we have a lot of questions in the chat, and I think you guys have some of you have already answered them. Let me see one that we haven't answered. Looks like we answered all of them. I think I have one more question. It's more of a fun question that we could actually go into is like, what is your favorite like college memory with, because you guys were all in the clubs that hosted like this event. What's your favorite like college memory being in like a club, or honestly, what's your favorite college memory in general? I'd love to hear that just to kind of change gears away from the professional side of things. And let's start with Jiying this time. I feel like you're gonna say the baking decal, but you could it could be anything.
Gosh. I would say, I think in terms of club, I love SAAS and everything it brought to me. I also was involved in Wushu, which is Chinese martial arts, for several years. And I think that was my first family outside of family. And just not to compare it to SAAS or anything. I joined SAAS in junior year, I joined Wushu in freshman year, so there's no comparison. But I'd say that sense of community in a place that was away from my actual home for the first time in my life was super, super important to me. These were people who were not competing with me in classes, who were not competing with me for jobs. They were just there because we all liked each other as people and we had a common interest in hobby, and we would just do fun and cool and crazy things together. And I think from a social standpoint, that's really, really important to nurture those relationships and water those relationships over time, because honestly, some people that you meet in college are people that are going to be friends throughout the rest of your life. But also just from a more like, since this is a career panel, I want to make it a little bit more from a professional view as well. But when you're in college, you meet the most people at the fastest pace that you'll ever probably will in your entire life. So network, get to know people, get to know what they're interested in, follow their journeys, and you never know when that's going to pay you back down the line as well. And if you can contribute to people, like if you can help someone with their problem set, if you can help a club achieve a goal, like that's also a work experience. You never know, but like maybe 10 years down the line, this person will be like, oh, I worked with this guy in SAAS. He really knew his AWS back then. I'm going to hire him just based on that. Like, it doesn't even have to be stuff that's on your resume. I can't tell you how far that takes you. Like, I got my current role through a connection that I made through just an internship that I never thought would go anywhere. So be open to that and water that and really just dig into it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you added more onto that question. I guess you could also tell us a little bit of like some advice, because I think you gave some really good piece of advice, Jiying. But favorite memory and advice maybe that correlates with that. But yeah, let's start with Shashank.
Yeah, so kind of like in terms of that, in retrospect, I think like, I would say like I kind of like Jiying want to, have like more important like social clubs rather than just like more clubs or other things that are like career focused or something. Like if I would, had taken like sort of like one less career focused club or something, wouldn't have really made a difference in terms of outcome. But in terms of experience / combination, one of the greatest things was like try to find like a class that you're very interested in and then see if you can get on the staff of that, because the experience you get out of it in terms of just like learning it from a teaching perspective, it unlocks a lot of the knowledge. Plus you also find like, other people who are pretty much interested into it, and then they form a pretty good social circle that you can learn. Like, for example, I started on the staff of Data 8. Oscar was there as well. And then I went on to Stat 88, like probably within like the first semester teaching in either of those as a GSI, I learned all of that. But then I stayed on longer kind of just like for the social connections and so on, right? Because like the seniors that who were teaching beforehand and then the juniors who came in after, like you kind of like realize that, okay, you find people you're kind of interested in and who are interested in the same things as that and form a pretty good social circle. I think that was one of the best experiences for me in terms of teaching, because not only I got to learn, but I also got to make like very good connections out of it.
Awesome. Yeah, let's go to Isabelle.
I definitely agree with, I don't know if I could think of a specific memory that was like stands out as my favorite, but just like all the random shenanigans and serendipitous events that you do with your friends, whether you find those friends through like a club or any other type of community, like, yeah, going into the city at 2 a.m. because somebody wants boba, or like, we used to steal Cowhacks bears. I would not condone that anymore. Yeah, don't do that anymore. I'm sure they do not want you stealing Cowhacks bears. But I think just like trying, I never got one, but trying was always like fun. It's just like random things like that. So I'm not gonna like go too much into depth there, but I think for me at least, one of my favorite memories was my senior year. I finally finished all my other prerequisites, everything for my major. So I just took like 6 or 7 classes in a ton of different departments that I was interested in. I took like French and sociology classes and philosophy classes, and what else did I take? I can't remember all of them. Oh, I took political science class too, and I really enjoyed that semester. I think especially in Berkeley, we can be in a pre-professional bubble, and we can think about all the like things we can do to perfect our careers. But your life outside of college is not just your career. Your career is probably, well, depending on different people, a small portion of what your whole life is going to be. And I think college is one of those last times that you have resources in front of you to explore and try whatever you want. And so I would highly recommend like just reflecting on like, do I need to do this one extra thing for like software engineering or for data science, or is there this thing I've always wanted to try and I like don't think I can because I need to optimize for like my career. Like just taking some time to think about that. I think like I wish I did that more in college, and I did it in senior year and I really enjoyed it, and I wish I did that for the years before that. So not saying everyone should just quit what they're doing and like take random classes in the humanities, but like take some time and think about it.
Yeah, I could definitely resonate with that. Let's go to Jorge.
I think one of my favorite memories was my first Codebase retreat, just because when I joined, it was still virtual. And the semester after that, we like actually got to do all the in-person events. So I was like, wow, this is like what I missed out on. And yeah, I think that was like a very special semester, just like seeing people actually in person that I have met like just on Zoom. And yeah, it was really fun, all of the events that we did. But in terms of advice, I think, yeah, people have been touching on this, but not necessarily just focusing on like classes or things that are related to your career. Like I also took the baking decal, which I don't know how I got it, but yeah, it's kind of just luck, I guess. But that was also one of my favorite classes. I also took a lot of other decals, like the intro to Photoshop one. There's like there's one on like Marvel MCU. So yeah, a lot of decals that are pretty cool. I would recommend taking. And then in terms of like professional advice, I think I would just say if you're thinking of like applying to internships, just like keep applying. I think a lot of people will say that it's just like a numbers game. Like I know I've heard of people applying to like hundreds and hundreds of companies, which it can be a lot. So definitely like don't like balance how much you wanna like how many companies you want to apply to. But yeah, I guess there's like a lot of luck involved in the process. And yeah, if you're like leaning towards applying to a company, like just apply. Even if like you think there's no chance you'll get it. Like I actually came into Google through the STEP internship, which is for freshmen and sophomores. So I applied my sophomore year, and then that led to like getting an offer for a SWE internship the following year, and then getting like my full-time offer. So I think like if I hadn't applied my sophomore year, then I like probably wouldn't be here on my full-time job. So yeah, I guess my like main piece of advice would be to just like apply even if you don't think you'll get a position, and just take it like one round at a time. Like if you get invited to the like initial phone screen and just like focus on that. Like don't really think about whether you'll get the position or not, but just take it like one step at a time.
Thanks, Jorge. I know we're going a little bit over time. It's 3:30. If any of the alumni have to go, feel free to definitely drop your like socials in the chat, like your LinkedIn, so people can stay connected. But yeah, let's go to Brian.
Yeah, for better or for worse, I have like a very specific memory in mind, and there's not really a lesson with it either. So I'm just gonna tell a story. I'm not sure. Oscar, Shashank, and Jiying. Were you guys? I don't remember if you guys were on the retreat in like spring 2019. That was the time you were, yeah, because you probably know, you might remember what I'm talking about. It was like for the SAAS retreat, we drove down to like Yosemite, and it just like rained like the previous like week or something, like a bunch. So like the roads were like super muddy and like messed up and stuff. Like, long story short, our like car got like stuck in the mud for like 4 hours, like the most like insane like thing I've like ever like dealt with on like a retreat. Like I think in the end we ended up having to have like some like cowboy nearby try to get us out, and then he like got stuck too in the mud, and then we felt really bad because now this guy was stuck in the mud with us, and it's these bird watchers came to get us both out of the mud, and we were literally there for like 4 or 5 hours with like no cell reception. Like we had to climb up a hill to get like any reception to be able to call like AAA or whatever. It was like a total mess. But unfortunately, those are the kinds of shenanigans I remember, and we eventually like did get the car out after like a ridiculous like trial. So yeah, I think those are the kinds of experiences where I had with my friends. Like still remember them very well, and I still like joke about them and like talk about them like quite fondly. Looking back at them, and like everyone I still stay in touch with. So yeah, I guess advice is like don't drive to Yosemite like when it's just rained the previous week, and like be careful of like very muddy roads. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that sounds tragic. I would I would not know what to do if that happened.
No, yeah.
Let's go to Oscar.
I don't know how I follow that up, to be honest. But I'd say I agree with everybody on like probably the best parts of Berkeley, like the people you meet, the moments you have, just like getting boba. I don't know, just even just walking on campus, like that's a very different feeling walking as an alumni on campus versus when you're a student on campus. So definitely like cherish that for sure. I'd say there's probably some pieces of advice I'd give. First, soft skills are so important, so important. They don't teach you that for the most part in classes and all that. But if for me, I hate the word networking. I don't really like the connotations that come with it. Think about it as just making friends. Go out there, make friends with people. Like as Jean said, this is the most people you're going to see, like at one point and one time. Like make sure you expand your horizons, talk to people you never really would have otherwise talked to, because that is going to help like expand your horizons a lot. Also, I'll say learning is super important. Like you're in college, like this is the point of college is to learn. So take classes, take things that like you would never have thought to take. Like my favorite class is a political economy class, and it really helps shape like the way I see the world today. And that in itself is super valuable for me. Like the concepts I learned that don't really have an impact in terms of day-to-day like work, but when it comes to like how I see the world, how I kind of like how I am and my identity, super, super important. And also learning doesn't stop it from college too. That's also kind of one thing took me a while to realize too. It's like, yes, like structured learning stops, but you're going to be learning in your job, you're going to be learning through life. Like make sure you kind of have that kind of like curious mindset of like wanting to learn more. And I think that is going to serve you well. And you're going to just learn random things. Like you never know when a random thing is going to pop up, and then you're able to have a conversation with somebody else because you know a little bit about, something that's random. And I guess the final things I'll say is like make sure you go out and find opportunities. Like don't be afraid to apply for things. Don't be afraid to look for things. And I kind of ask myself, like, I think this is one question I've been asking myself is like, what if you had all the confidence in the world to do anything you wanted to do, right? Like as cheesy as it is, like what would you do? And like what stops you from doing that, right? Like, and to be honest, like not really that much does. Like take those chances, make sure that you're pushing yourself, make sure you're taking breaks too. Don't push it too hard, but what can you be, right? Like that's kind of the question. And I think college is a great time, but also it doesn't stop in college too. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's amazing advice, Oscar. Well, that's all the time we have for today. I just want to thank all the alumni for coming out and just sharing their like a lot about their experiences and all like the advice that they have. I know that some of them shared their LinkedIn's in the chat, so if you want to connect with them, just scroll through the chat. But yeah, thank you guys for coming, and I hope to stay connected.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.